All right, so we have some assumed leaks as to who the 4.4 rerun characters are going to be, obviously with the introduction of Himiko Nova. The first half, supposedly, keep in mind this is all speculation, anything can change, right? So supposedly the first half is going to be Sparxie, Heng PT, Evernight, with the second half being Anaxa, Aventurine, and Jade. And what I think is going to be very important is whether or not these characters are going to actually be worth it. And we're going to talk about their current value in the meta so you can make the determining choice yourself based off of your team and characters you currently have on your account. So the first half, we are going to see the rerun of Sparxie, Heng PT, and Evernight. Obviously, Sparxie is an excellent DPS character and sub DPS character if you do run the Silver Wolf level 9's team. We're also going to talk about Eidolons as well, E1 and E2 for the most part, but Sparxie can also be run as a main DPS character if you run her along Yao Guang, Hua Hua, and Sparkle in order to get more SP generation for her. Taking a look at Eidolons, E1 is when Aha Instant ends, you're going to be gaining 5 punchline, and for every 1 punchline owned, increases the all-type res pen for all allies by 1.5, maxing up to 15. So you can see that is going to be an excellent option, especially for the fact that if you want to run not only Sparxie as the main DPS character, but also even the sub DPS character for the Silver Wolf level 9's team, as that's going to allow Silver Wolf to get more all-type res pen, which is going to help her do more damage. Paired up with Yao Guang, obviously it is a snowballing effect where more and more damage is going to be held. Obviously more hot instances with Yao Guang especially, so it's very good. And it's very worth noting that it just says when the Aha instance ends, so Yao Guang's extra instance from her ultimate is going to count towards this, so you're going to be able to get to that max 15% threshold a lot easier. E2 states that when the Aha instance ends, exact same wording as E1, so very worth noting. Sparxie is going to gain 1 extra turn and 2 thrill, and thrill is very important because we'll go over the second part here, but it's very important because that offsets skill point consumption, so you can create more punchline with Sparxie. And then for every 1 thrill consumed, increases this unit's crit damage by 10%, lasting for 2 turns, stacking up to 4 times. So if you can very well be in a scenario where you already have 4 thrill from the ultimates and with all the Aha instance that you currently have. So, and you don't even have to use all of the thrill, to be completely honest. You can just use 1 thrill and then boom, just do your attack. You gain 1, you don't get a whole lot of punchline, but there's definitely an easy way to go about doing this. So you have additional 40% crit damage on Sparxie, and even then a lot of people like E2 for the SP and the thrill generation to create more punchline for Silver Wolf level 9s. But honestly, the main key here is that an E1 is actually better for a Silver Wolf level 9's team, whereas E2 Sparxie just becomes like the main DPS character on said team. So that is Sparxie. She's a very good character. Heng PT is obviously a very good. He's going to be pairing up extremely well with the new Himiko Nova, being able to provide a shield, an attack bonus, something that the Himiko Nova character really wants and prioritizes. E1 is that when Heng PT uses his ultimate to create the shield to increase the attack of the character, recovers 1 skill point, which is very good, and increase the bondmate's all-type res pen by 18%, lasting for 3 turns. That is going to be extremely beneficial, not only for Himiko Nova, but also just like if you run him like on a just like a dot team as your sustained character. It helps out Hysolence. You can also run him when it comes to a Finon team, being able to increase Finon's attack. Any main DPS character, you can just plop this guy in for sustainability option for the shield, and having the all type res pen increase by 18% is extremely good. E2. Additionally, increases the number of actions for the enhanced Soul Dragon from Ultimate by 2, which is very good because it allows everybody to get more shield, so that's very, very strong. And after he uses the Ultimate, Soul Dragon advances as action by 100%, so you get that beneficial effect of using the Ultimate, you're getting everybody an initial shield, and then you launch the follow-up with the Soul Dragon, and boom, you increase the shield, which is extremely good. Then, when the enhanced Soul Dragon takes action, the additional damage dealt by the bondmate becomes 200% of its original damage, and the shield effect provided in this instance becomes 200% of the original shield effect. So you can see here that E1 is a great team boosting Eidolon, being able to increase whoever you select as the bondmate increases their all-type res pen by 18%, so that's more damage. E2 provides more sustainability for the entire team, but also increasing the bondmate's just overall damage output tremendously. So very, very strong candidate for an option. Moving over to Evernight, obviously we all know how good she is. E1 is when Evernight is on the field, if there are like 4, 3, or 2 enemy targets on the field, all Memo Sprites deal equivalent damage. It progressively increases based off fewer and fewer and fewer enemies on the team. So that is just a team-wide boost for everybody, especially on the Remembrance team, which is the main team she's going to be on. E2 is that it's going to be increasing Evernights and Eevee's crit damage by 40%. That's amazing boost. And each time Evernight gains Memora, increases the number of Memora gained by 2 points, and when using the ultimate, additionally gains 2 charges of Darkest Riddle. So more damage output essentially for her E2. So E1, very much like Don Hung PT, is like a team-wide buff for everybody, because ideally you're going to be having her, Eevee, so that's 2. Then you are also going to be having Castoris and Netherwing, and then you're going to be having Hysolins and Ika, and then, you know, Cyrene, but Cyrene technically doesn't really consider a Memo Sprite. But regardless, everybody's damage is going to be increased. E2, her own individual damage is going to be dramatically increased. Now, moving over to part 2. In part 2, honestly, seems like it's a little bit more of a dud. We'll start with Jade, just because she's the first character there. Follow-up attack damage from Jade's talent is going to be increased by 31%. After Debt Collector character attacks and the number of enemies on the field hit is either 2 or 1, Jade additionally gains 1 or 2 points of charge respectively. It's kind of like a mediocre DPS increase for Jade. Obviously it relies on having another erudition character on the team. That's just essentially what Jade wants, and you know, for the most part anyways. And then E2 is when there are 15 stacks of pawned asset. Jade's crit rate is increased by 18%. You can see here Jade's really not a character that's worth investing into at this current point. She's still decent and good. I forgot Anaxa, but she's just not at the same level of some other characters. Anaxa, very, very good character. You can run a hyper carry Anaxa setup with Saridra, and you can have, what is it, 6? I think 6 or 4 instances of his bounce skill, which is incredible. So the E1 is after using the skill for the first time, recovers 1 skill point, and when skill is used to hit enemy targets, important targets, decreases the target's defense by 15%, lasting for 2 turns. Keynote to here is that it does not stack, unfortunately, but again, like I said, if you pair this up with Saridra getting 6, I want to say it's 6 instances of his skill, then you're just ignoring, you know, what is that, 15 times 5, that's what, 65, no, 70, yeah, 75 overall percent of the damage, because of the first skill you're using to inflict the defense reduction, and then you have 6 more or 5 more instances of doing that, so that you're technically ignoring a grand total of 75%, which is incredible. That's very beneficial, especially if you have Saridra. E2 is when enemy targets enter the battle, triggers 1 instance of the talent's weakness implant effect, and reduces their all-type res pen by 20%. Extremely good. This is where you start to see Anaxa really truly shine with the damage overall. I definitely think he is a character that is very valuable to have given the fact that he is wind. Whoops. If we go back to the characters with the recent additions, you can see here we don't really have a whole lot of wind main DPS characters since Anaxa. So if you do have that setup with Saridra, then it is very, very good, especially if you can get to that E2 component for overall damage. Aventurine is going to be a sustained character, a shielding character. E1 increases the crit damage by 20% for all allies with the fortified wager. How he works is anybody with the shield, anybody who takes damage, follow-up attack damage, you gain 1 extra charge. And once you reach 7 charges, and he could randomly generate amount of charges with his ultimate. But once you get that 7, you instantly launch a follow-up attack that increases the fortified wager shield. After using the ultimate, provides all allies with the fortified shield, so you can see that. So by the time you use the ultimate, everybody's going to be getting that 20% crit damage increase, and whose shield is equal to 100% of the one provided by the skill, lasting up to 3 turns. So very good. You essentially are going to be getting the shield effect from the skill, which is greater than the ultimate, and you're also just going to be getting that crit damage bonus for everybody on the team. E2 is when using the basic attack, reduces all targets all type res pen by 11% for 3 turns. And honestly, like, that's the main part of his whole gimmick, is that he wants to be hit, and he wants to, once you have the skill up and you don't have any skill points, well, guess what, you can use the basic attack and you are going to be inflicting with all type res pen for 3 turns, which is extremely good. If you asked me to rank all 6 of these, including Eidolons, right now I would probably have to say number 1 is still Don Hung PT, just because of the versatility, just because of the fact that he was initially free, granted if you had played that time, so having him already for free is very, very beneficial. But even then, still, if you don't, I still think he's extremely good. He's probably the best out of these 6. And then number 2, honestly, is probably going to be Evernight, because of the fact that she can be run as the main DPS character in a quote-unquote remembrance team without having everybody on the team. Number 3 is probably going to be Anaxa, just because of the fact that that pair with Saridra is so good. It's arguably even better than if you paired Yao Guang with Sparxie, and Sparxie is going to be my number 4 option, which is kind of surprising just because I really like using Sparxie in my Elation team with SW9s. I think it's very synergistic and they work extremely well together. But I do think Anaxa is slightly better. Sparxie does have the added benefit that she can go from that sub DPS role on her ideal team to becoming the main DPS character when she gets to E2. Number 5 is going to be Aventurine. He's still extremely good and potent in the meta, but it's just the scaling and the percentages are just not as high as some of the other characters in terms of the shield, in terms of the healing, but the ease of use is extremely good. And then last is just going to be Jade. Honestly, don't waste your time with Jade unless you're like a collector and just want to get all the characters. But just as a rerun, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in my opinion, including their Eidolons. I just think that those are the top characters, also because of the fact that like these 3 characters for the most part in phase 1 unfortunately are all on great teams. Super splashable right here, can be run as a main DPS character, good on the remembrance team, ideal on a Elation team, but can be run as the main DPS character, and then is just a great main DPS himself. Can be run on like a sub DPS ish role if you really want to get weird with it. Still somewhat viable, but just has fallen off completely.